revealed that a Center City hotel will help quarantine the city's most vulnerable population, people who are homeless. Matt Petrillo broke this story, and he joins us from Center City with more. Matt.
Walk with me for a moment down the main corridor of Kensington Avenue. If you look up, you see the rusted steel of the L train, a relic of industrial might rattling overhead. But if you look down, you see a scene that looks less like a neighborhood in the wealthiest nation on earth, and more like a field hospital in a war zone. We are standing in the epicenter of the largest open-air drug market on the East Coast. But to call it just a drug market is to miss the tragedy entirely. This is a containment zone. It is a place where the American dream has curdled into a nightmare of blue tarps, shivering bodies, and a despair so thick you can taste it in the air. In January 2025, on a single freezing night, the city of Philadelphia counted over 5,500 human beings with nowhere to go. That number isn't just a statistic. It is a siren screaming that the system has collapsed. While politicians debate in City Hall and developers build luxury condos just a few miles away, thousands are trapped in a lethal loop of addiction, eviction, and survival. Why, after decades of funding and dozens of programs, is the problem getting worse? Why are we seeing elderly residents pushed onto the street alongside teenagers? And why does the city of brotherly love feel so cold to its most vulnerable citizens? Welcome to Homeless Lens. Tonight, we are peeling back the layers of the Philadelphia crisis to understand why the trap was built, who is stuck inside, and if there is any way out. Part 1. The brutal math of survival. To understand why the tents on Kennedy Boulevard and the shadows of Kensington are filling up, you have to look past the addiction crisis and stare directly at the brutal math problem that is crushing the working class. There's a persistent myth that homelessness is strictly a result of bad choices or moral failings. But in Philadelphia, homelessness is largely a result of arithmetic. It is a gap between income and survival that has become mathematically impossible to bridge. Let's look at the numbers for 2025. The fair market rent for a modest one-bedroom apartment in Philadelphia has climbed to approximately $1,750 a month. Now, compare that to the safety net for a disabled individual relying on Supplemental Security Income (SSI). The maximum monthly payment in Pennsylvania is just $967. Do the math. If you are on disability, you are starting every single month nearly $800 in the hole just for a roof over your head. That doesn't include food. It doesn't include electricity, heat, clothing, or transportation. It is a structural eviction notice written into the economy. Philadelphia is currently short more than 64,000 affordable housing units. This shortage isn't just an inconvenience, it is a catastrophe. It means that when a low-income family loses their home perhaps due to a medical bill, a lost job, or a landlord deciding to sell, there is literally nowhere for them to go. They fall off the bottom rung of the ladder, and the ground is a long way down. We are seeing a new demographic on the streets. It is no longer just the chronically homeless we saw 10 years ago. It is the elderly. It is the working poor who live in their cars. It is people who did everything right, followed the rules, and still got crushed by an economy that values real estate appreciation over human survival. This economic violence is the foundation of the crisis. Before a single pill is swallowed or a single needle is used, the trauma of poverty has already done the work of breaking the human spirit. When you live with the constant, grinding anxiety of not knowing where you will sleep, the leap to self-medication isn't a fall. Often, it feels like the only way to endure the night. Part 2. The toxic supply and the health emergency. We cannot talk about Philadelphia without addressing the shadow that looms largest over Kensington, the opioid crisis. But to simply call it drugs is to minimize the horror of what is actually happening on the street. The supply has changed. 10 years ago, we were talking about heroin. Then came fentanyl, a synthetic opioid 50 times stronger. But in 2025, the street supply in Philadelphia has mutated into something far more terrifying. We are dealing with polysubstance mixtures, cocktails of fentanyl mixed with xylazine, known on the street as tranq, and increasingly newer synthetic sedatives like medetomidine. This is critical to understand because it explains why traditional solutions are failing. Xylazine is a veterinary sedative. It is not an opioid. That means Narcan, the miracle drug used to reverse overdoses, does not work on it. When people overdose on this cocktail, they don't just stop breathing, they enter a state of deep chemical sedation that can last for hours. Furthermore, xylazine is a vasoconstrictor. It shrinks blood vessels and reduces blood flow to the skin. This causes horrific, necrotic wounds, injuries that look like chemical burns to open up on people's bodies, often far away from where they injected. We are seeing an epidemic of amputations in Kensington, not because of diabetes or accidents, but because the drug supply is physically rotting people from the inside out. This creates a barrier to housing that few talk about. If you are suffering from open wounds, if you require daily medical care, you cannot simply be placed in a standard shelter. You need a medical facility. Yet, the detox and recovery centers in Philadelphia are not seamlessly linked to long-term housing. Imagine surviving an overdose, waking up in a hospital, being stabilized, and then being discharged right back to the same street corner with no home, no wound care, and the sickness of withdrawal setting in. This is the reality. The health system treats the acute emergency, the overdose, but ignores the chronic emergency, the lack of a safe place to heal. The city of drugs narrative often paints the people of Kensington as zombies or criminals. But through the homeless lens, we see them as patients in a collapsing healthcare system. They are victims of a poisoned supply chain and a medical infrastructure that has completely abandoned the concept of long-term care for the indigent. Part 3. The fragmented safety net. If the problem is so obvious, lack of housing and a medical emergency, why isn't it being fixed? Philadelphia is not lacking in compassion, nor is it lacking in nonprofits. In fact, the city has over 60 different organizations working alongside the Office of Homeless Services. But this abundance of organizations reveals the third pillar of the crisis: fragmentation. The support system in Philadelphia is a jigsaw puzzle where the pieces don't fit together. You have one organization that handles food. You have another that handles mental health. A third handles addiction, and a fourth handles housing vouchers. None of them share the same database. None of them operate on the same timeline. A person on the street has to navigate this bureaucratic maze while in a state of crisis. Imagine trying to coordinate complex medical care and legal paperwork while you haven't slept in 3 days and you possess no phone and no ID. It is a setup for failure. We call this the half-hearted loop. A person gets a little bit of help, maybe a sandwich, maybe a night in a shelter, but the bridge to stability is never finished. They fall back into the gap. Just look at the fiscal year data. Over 15,000 unique individuals cycled through the city's shelter system. The key word is cycled. They entered and they left, often right back to the street. A shelter bed is not a solution. It is a pause button. And without a permanent home waiting on the other side, the pause eventually ends. Project Home, a local organization, has proven that there is a better way. Their supportive housing model, which pairs a permanent apartment with on-site medical and job support, has retention rates of over 90%. When you treat the whole person, they stay housed. But these programs are expensive and difficult to scale without massive government investment. Instead of scaling what works, the city relies on a patchwork of temporary fixes. We are funding the emergency room instead of the cure. We are paying for the ambulance ride, the police overtime, and the prison cell, all of which cost far more than simply providing a supportive housing unit. It is fiscal insanity driven by a lack of political will to unify the system. Part 4. The illusion of order, sweeps and clearances. In the absence of a cure, the city turns to a painkiller, the sweep. Throughout 2024 and 2025, Philadelphia intensified its campaign of encampment resolutions. This is the bureaucratic term for sending in police and sanitation workers to bulldoze tents, throw away survival gear, and disperse the people living there. We saw this recently in Kensington and along the waterfront. The logic from City Hall is that they are cleaning up the neighborhood and restoring public order. And to be fair, for the residents who live in these neighborhoods, the chaos of an open-air drug market is unbearable. They deserve safe streets. But we have to ask, does a sweep solve homelessness, or does it just move it? Through the homeless lens, we see the collateral damage of these operations. When a camp is cleared, the people don't vanish. They scatter. They move from the main avenue to the side streets. They hide in abandoned houses. They move to parks and other neighborhoods. Worse, during these sweeps, vital connections are severed. Outreach workers spend months building trust with individuals, learning their names, their medical histories, and getting them ready to accept help. When the bulldozers come, that trust is shattered. The person you were about to house is now gone, hiding from the authorities, their phone lost, their documents destroyed in the trash compactor. This is displacement lethality. By engaging in a game of whack-a-mole, the city makes it harder to deliver services. We are prioritizing the optics of a clean street over the reality of a saved life. It creates a darker dynamic, too. When people are pushed out of sight, they are pushed away from Narcan. They are pushed away from clean needle exchanges. They die in the dark, alone in abandoned row homes, because the public demanded they be removed from the sidewalk. Is it fair to create a policy that prioritizes visual order over human survival? We are treating human beings like refuse to be swept away, rather than citizens in crisis who need to be lifted up. It is a strategy of exhaustion, hoping that if we make life miserable enough, they will simply disappear. But they have nowhere to go. Part 5. A Tale of Two Cities, the Houston and Helsinki models. It is easy to look at Philadelphia and despair, to think that this problem is unsolvable. But that is a lie. We know it is a lie because other cities have already solved it. Let's look at Houston, Texas. A decade ago, Houston had one of the worst homeless populations in America. But they decided to do something radical. They stopped managing the problem and started ending it. Houston adopted a strict housing-first strategy. They forced all their nonprofits to work together under one command structure. They stopped funding transitional shelters and poured every dollar into permanent apartments. The result? They slashed chronic homelessness by over 60%. They moved 25,000 people directly from the streets into apartments. They didn't ask people to get sober first. They didn't ask them to find God or get a job. They gave them a key. And once people had a door that locked, they stabilized. Then look at Helsinki, Finland. Helsinki is the only capital city in Europe where homelessness is declining. In fact, street homelessness is practically extinct. How? They decided that housing is a fundamental human right, not a reward for good behavior. In Helsinki, there are no shelters. There are only homes. The state bought up apartments, built new social housing, and converted old shelters into long-term units. The cost was high upfront, but the savings were massive. By eliminating the need for emergency services, the state actually saved money in the long run. Lisbon, Portugal, followed a similar path, decriminalizing drug use and pouring resources into health and housing. Their retention rates people who stay housed are over 90%. So if Houston and Helsinki can do it, why can't Philadelphia? The difference isn't resources. Philadelphia is a wealthy city in a wealthy nation. The difference is philosophy. Houston and Helsinki accepted that you cannot fix a person while they are sleeping on concrete. You have to house them to heal them. Philadelphia is still stuck in the old way of thinking. We are still debating whether people deserve housing. We are still putting barriers in place, sobriety requirements, background checks, hoops to jump through. We are letting the perfect be the enemy of the good, while thousands suffer. The contrast is heartbreaking. We have the blueprints. We have the data. We know exactly how to end this crisis. The fact that we have it is a choice. Part 6, the Crossroads 2026 and beyond. As we look toward the future, Philadelphia stands at a terrifying crossroads. Federal policy is shifting. In 2025, new administrations and changing priorities in Washington are threatening to cut funding for housing first initiatives. There's a push to return to the treatment first model, mandatory rehab, work requirements, and transitional facilities. This sounds good in a soundbite. Get them clean, get them to work. But we know from 50 years of history that it fails. You cannot mandate recovery for a person who is freezing. You cannot mandate a job for a person who has no shower. If Philadelphia follows this trend, prioritizing enforcement and barriers over low barrier housing, the numbers we saw in 2025 will look small compared to what is coming. We are risking a return to the bad old days of mass incarceration for vagrancy, filling prisons with the mentally ill because we refuse to build them homes. But there is another path. There is a movement growing in the city led by activists, medical professionals, and neighbors demanding a unified strategy. Programs like PHL Housing Plus act as a glimmer of hope, testing unrestricted cash payments to prevent evictions. We are seeing communities fight back against the fragmentation. The question is, will the political leadership have the courage to double down on what works? Will they fight the NIMB "why not in my backyard" mindset to build affordable housing in every neighborhood, not just the poor ones? Will they integrate the health department with the housing department to treat the trank crisis as a housing issue? The next 5 years will determine the soul of this city. We can either become a fortress city, where the rich live in guarded towers and the poor are swept into the shadows, or we can reclaim the title of the city of brotherly love. Success requires courage. It requires admitting that the old ways, the sweeps, the fragmented charities, the judgment have failed. It requires looking at a person slumped on Kensington Avenue and seeing not a junkie, but a neighbor who has been failed by every system designed to protect them. Outro. Homelessness is not a natural disaster. It is not an earthquake or a hurricane. It is a man-made disaster. It is designed by policy, fueled by economics, and maintained by indifference. When you walk through Philadelphia today, you are seeing the physical manifestation of a broken contract. We promised that if you worked hard, you could live. That contract is void. We promised to care for the sick. That contract is void. But the story isn't over. We have the power to write a new ending. It starts with rejecting the narrative that this is inevitable. It starts with demanding that our tax dollars go to keys, not handcuffs. It starts with refusing to look away. Here at Homeless Lens, we are committed to showing you the reality the brochures leave out. We believe that you cannot fix what you cannot face. So, I want to ask you, do you believe Philadelphia should adopt the housing first model like Houston? Or do you think stricter enforcement is the answer? Is housing a human right or a reward? This is a conversation we need to have loudly and urgently. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. We read them and we want to know what you think. If this video opened your eyes, if it made you think differently about the person on the corner, please like this video and subscribe to Homeless Lens. Share this with your friends. Help us break the silence. Because until we solve this, until every citizen has a door to lock and a bed to sleep in, none of us can truly be at home. Thank you for watching. Stay compassionate, stay informed, and keep your lens focused on the truth.